everybody, my name is
BigAnf.
Let's rock.
And roll.
Final Fantasy is one of the most celebrated series in RPG history, being home to many classic games. The original on the NES, although achieved massive success in Japan, it didn't quite have the same impact when the game was released in the United States. From there were two sequels with maybe a spin-off or two here and there. Squaresoft were always with Nintendo and had other great games in the SNES, such as Chrono Trigger and Super Mario RPG. In the mid-90s, 3D gaming was on the way, and Squaresoft wanted the next Final Fantasy to be the jump to the third dimension, with the Nintendo 64, where they used a tech demo based on Final Fantasy III. Due to limitations, they scrapped the project and abandoned ship to the Sony PlayStation, where they had a lot less limitations to deal with in comparison to the N64. It was, at its time, the most expensive video game in production, and on January 31st, 1997, Final Fantasy VII?
This is why I hate localization. Things get lost in translation, and as a result, games can become poorly dubbed into different languages.
With strong anticipation and a pretty expensive marketing campaign, only about $100 million. Wait, hold on. You can actually hear your pupils dilate? People in 97 really had strong ears back then. Final Fantasy VII, despite the confusion of where 4, 5, and 6 went, was released with critical acclaim, going as far as becoming the second best-selling game on the PS1, sandwiched in the middle of the Gran Turismo games. Because Granny Tourist Mode sounds like a fun game. Twice. Squaresoft, more appropriately Square Enix, really loves Final Fantasy VII, and they created a bunch of projects to further expand the universe of the game, which led to a sequel and prequels, and a movie, and an anime, and a book, and an anime based on the book, and a goddamn live-action TV series that was scrapped in favor of something more akin to the more traditional Final Fantasies, like FF14. It wasn't even part of the compilation, but it was still worth mentioning. Oh yeah, Super Smash Bros. This time, I'ma take a more critical look at this game, and see whether it's a true classic or just a glorified step forward in the role-playing game genre. Let's find out. What even is a Final Fantasy VII, you ask? It definitely wasn't the final one, that's for sure. It's a turn-based role-playing game where you play as a moody anime boy with a giant sword named Cloud Strife, who joins the terrorist group Avalanche, where he's introduced to Barrett Wallace, who is the leader of the group, as well as Tifa Lockhart, who was best friends with Cloud when they were kids. The Avalanche group fights in order to save the planet Gaia from the Shinra Corporation, who is using up the planet's life as an energy source for their military and song. Also, they have to deal with a man named Sephiroth, who wants to destroy the planet entirely due to his anger towards the Shinra for making it the way it is. Along the way, Cloud encounters many different allies, and one of them... oh dear. Aerith? Let's just call it Aerith, because that's what Wikipedia said.
My teachers aren't going to be proud of that. Anyway,
it is shown that Aerith Gainsborough has the key to saving the world in case things go too far, and because of that, everyone is fighting over for her, so that means there are technically 3 sides, with each one having their own ways into what the fate of the world should be, while Aerith is in the middle, with the Avalanche keeping her for most of the game. If you had absolutely no idea of what I said, think of the plot as an environmental campaign. You're welcome. That's the basics of the general plot. Traditional save the world type of scenario, but trust me, things get much more hectic as the game goes on. How does it play? It's an active time battle where you have to wait in order to attack, defend, run, and use an item. However, there is a system that is used to improve your options in battle other than simply changing to stronger weapons and armor. This is called the materia system, where you can equip them onto your character. There's a wide range of materia, where you can perform magic attacks such as bolt and ice. While you can simply just mash the X button to attack, it isn't as effective as doing more damage to the enemies in comparison to using magic, especially in boss fights where you clearly want to take the boss down as soon as possible.
And these bosses can get really hard at some points.
Materia can also provide extra commands to use for better advantages in battles, such as the Sense Materia, which is useful since it identifies an enemy's weakness and resistances. Pairing Materia, which can be combined with other types of materia. An example of this is the All Materia, which, depending on how it's paired, can hit every enemy in the arena or buffs everyone in the party. Independent materia simply gives you miscellaneous effects, such as extra health or the ability to lure chocobos. These kind of act like filler materia, so that once you don't know what to give your characters, why not increase their health and magic stats if you have the spaces, of course. And finally, summon materia, which summons a powerful ally for strong magic damage. However, they can only be used a limited amount of times per battle. Previous games had different classes per character, using different abilities, such as in Final Fantasy VI, where Terra has the ability to use magic, while someone like Locke cannot use magic but has the ability to steal. Now, every character is a freelancer, meaning that there is way more customization in this game. However, some characters work better at different things than others. While Barret has high defense, health, and strength stats, his magic ends up being the worst in the game. Compare this to someone like Aerith, where she has the best magic in the game, but her strength is as strong as hitting a stick at a brick wall, so have fun doing that when fighting bosses like Demon's Gate. The reason I'm explaining things so much rather than critiquing them is because of how broad this game gets with its materia system, and the replay value in choosing different layouts for your battle. The possibilities are endless. You can have Red 13 be a thief, or have Barret be a black mage. No pun intended. You always have to strategize with what character gets what materia, since there are certain points where you're forced to play as a character that you probably haven't played up to this point, and plan how to use them to the best potential. Something that a good RPG does is to give you lots of customization options to your characters, making this debatably the most flexible game in the series. The biggest addition to the combat is the limit break system, where characters can perform powerful attacks and buffs. I don't know why, but hitting one of these things are just
Extremely satisfying.
hearing that whoosh and seeing those big numbers is just so addictive, and I can't get enough of it. Especially when I switched to an old save file where I had all the limit breaks unlocked, which include Cloud's famous Omni Slash, being the strongest of them all. Moves like this are just amazing, even if there's a lot of grinding required. If there's a true reason to choose different characters, it's primarily for their limit breaks. Speaking of characters, can we just give this man a round of applause because Tetsuya Nomura has really done a brilliant job with these designs. So much so that he ended up becoming one of the 2 directors in the Final Fantasy VII remake, as well as Yoshinori Kitatse, who was the director of the original game. Nomura's got somewhat of a distinctive hand-drawn anime-like aspect about his work, where you can look at games such as Parasite Eve and go, yep, that's Nomura. Everyone in the party has a focus on saving the Earth, but also have their own motivations to make them so unique, with each character having their time in the spotlight, some more than others. In fact, Cloud and Sephiroth are literally gaming icons in terms of how recognizable they are, and they set the standard for many RPG protagonists and antagonists at the time, in terms of how hectic things can get, with the simplicity in their designs that they both have. The character portraits capture so much of the person being represented, even if some of them stare into my soul. I love how Cloud's portrait goes from fairly chill, but then at a certain point in the game, the portrait's brightness increased and Cloud's just very pissed off about it. Okay, now I'm getting into some spoilers. If you have interest in playing this game at all, I say turn the video off and play yourself some Final Fantasy VII. You're still here, aren't you?
Cloud Strife.
Cloud has to be one of the most relatable and well-written characters in the series so far. He seems to have somewhat of a split personality thing, where at times he acts like a smartass to everyone, but in a way where it comes off as quite comedic, instead of just being an arrogant bastard. This side of Cloud reminds me of one of those teenage boys in the late 90s, when having spiky hair with baggy pants and listening to Nookie by Limp Bizkit doesn't get you bullied. The other side of Cloud is a mentally challenged, frustrated individual who has trouble trying to remember who he is, and throughout the game, he gradually becomes insane and he can't control the Sephiroth inside of his head, which is punishing him for not understanding the truth. As a result, he tries to keep a false persona, acting like he's
the greatest man in the world,
in fear that he may break a promise with Tifa to prove that the next time they meet, Cloud will be in Soldier. There is a massive reason why Cloud clicks with so many people like myself. He's a three-dimensional character that comes off as a very relatable character, even though the character himself can be extreme at times. Say character one more time and Cloud will use braver on me. In terms of protagonists, I think he's the inspiration for future protagonists in the series, such as Squall and Lightning, and is right on top with the likes of Terra, Zidane, and Tidus. What? I like Tidus. And yes, I call him Tidus, not Titus. With that logic, I shall officially say Tifa instead of Tifa. Ran out.
Sephiroth. Wait, he doesn't have a last name?
Now, Sephiroth is another complex and interesting character in the game. He was once looked upon by many, including Cloud, to be the greatest man and soldier, and probably in the world. During a flashback segment, Sephiroth is fighting alongside Cloud, but as you see, the man's doing all the work for him. Lazy fart. That is, until Sephiroth started becoming ambitious in search for his mother, quotation marks, Genova, which claims that he is the savior of the world and shall lead the fate of the planet. This led to an outrage where he hated the Shinra for realizing the horrible practices they're doing to the planet, and eventually he hates everyone, only having Genova in mind. As a result, he tries to mess with Cloud so that he doesn't get in the way of his plans. You know, the man didn't kill Aerith just to be evil. It was an act in order to stop anyone else from stopping his plans, so you can make the argument that Sephiroth ain't even the true villain. That goes to Professor Hojo. Also, the man's boss battles are just pure excellence, being the only boss smart enough to put a barrier up before the fight begins. Characters like Red 13, Kate Sith, and Sid Highwind are very well rounded and have good motivations, but once these characters are out of the spotlight, the best thing they do is say some one-liners, even if they're in the party.
Sid Highwind.
Sid is the best of the three mentioned, and he has the most extensive character arc of the party, where you have to gain the 4 huge materia, as is the theory that it would be the substitute to saving the world, and Sid learns a valuable lesson to treat others the same way he wants to be treated.
Red 13.
Red 13 is next, and you first meet him in the Shinra Tower before you leave Midgar, and when the characters find out, he can talk. I don't know why, but I always get reminded of this scene from this amazing film that needs no introduction.
Hey! I can fly!
He can fly!
He can fly! He can talk! That's right!
And then he just kinda disappears. Then the party's way of transport crashes at Cosmo Canyon. You find out his real name, Nanaki, and the tragic story of one losing their father. And for the rest of the game, he does nothing, with the occasional line or two.
Kate Sith.
Kate Sith is kinda mediocre. It's a cool concept where he's a Shinra spy that ends up allying with Cloud and friends after realizing the horrible things he's involved in, but damn, this guy, or cat, on a Moogle thing, is so forgettable. Not in a design perspective, Cait Sith actually stands out in that regard, but he's so forgettable in a way of me not remembering what he does in the game. The only time I recall Cait Sith doing something somewhat memorable is the part where Cait Sith saves Barrett from hostage, and even then,
He's only used for 5 minutes.
But I do think there are positives to him. He can act as a source where the party can plan out what to do by listening to Reeve, the man controlling Cait Sith, and his conversations in Shinra, so he does become a more decent character towards the end of the game. Now I'll introduce you to the main ones that impact the story the most, starting with
Barrett Wallace.
Insert Mr. T joke here.
a badass man with a badass gun on his badass arm. Lots of ass. He's short-tempered and gets angry quite easily, mostly due to his hatred at Shinra for what they've done to him. He also has a daughter, Marlene, that he cares for the best of her, and is protective to the point where he doesn't want her to walk the same pathway as Barrett himself. He does set up the environment for Cloud, as he's the boss monitoring his employee on their first day, being a character that significantly impacts our protagonist right at the beginning.
Aerith Gainsborough.
Aerith is next, and to me, she's the driving point in the main story, and the primary love interest for Cloud. Kinda. She's generally a very positive person who really cares of people, and is always so full of life. Also, she's cute as freak. Everyone seems to be chasing her down, since she's the last of the ancient human beings called the Cetra, in which the Shinra want in order to do experiments with her, which also involves Red 13. The death scene is a massive impact to not just the characters, but also to us as players, since it removes a character that played such a significant role in the story. With Aerith out of the picture, something feels off. Even with all the characters, there's just that one spot left open, showing us that her significance was so great that it left a mark, letting us know that somebody's missing and it doesn't feel like everyone is here. Now, it's kinda hard for me to get emotional about Aerith's death since I find myself laughing because of reasons I'll get to later, but I always find her death as a main impact, unlike some other character deaths before and later in the series. Now, with Aerith out of the picture, who takes the place? Not Barrett, even though you have the opportunity to go on a date with him.
Hold on. Say that again?
Even though you have the opportunity to go on a date with him.
My life is complete. I get to date the hottest character in the game by default. That could be anyone. The competition's pretty fierce.
Tifa Lockhart.
I guess that leaves us with Tifa. Now, I hate to use this word unironically, but she's indeed waifu. A lot of people say that Cloud is emo, and I guess I know where you're coming from, but I do consider him to be the more aggressive kind of emo. Tifa's a different kind of emo, where everyone she knows and loves has either abandoned or been killed, and the only person who's close enough to her is Cloud. That's why she's quite shy and doesn't really like to talk to the larger crowds, but likes to speak with Cloud alone over important things, and even then, it isn't the Cloud that she used to know, but rather the Cloud that she did know under the filter of a soldier going through a war flashback. Tifa is the martial artist of the party, and is much more confident in battles, always willing to fight for what is right, kinda having that split personality that Cloud has, and overcomes her funk towards the end of the game, much like Cloud. There's a certain section in the game where Cloud finally submits to Sephiroth and gives him the black materia, ultimately causing him to get poisoned by Marco, which is the same energy that the Shinra uses to power up Midgar, and because of that, you can play as Tifa for a short time. You can do some side quests and they'll be slightly different since you're playing as another character. Talk to some horny old men and she stays back with Cloud since that's the only person she can go back to. and after a series of unfortunate events, Tifa and Cloud end up falling into a BigAnf, where she ends up having a near-death experience and enters Cloud's subconscious mind, where they have to travel back in time to regain their memory of what truly happened in the past, where you discover some really hectic story moments. So hectic that if I say anything more, the game will be giving Earthbound a run for its money.
Guess I gotta call my dad now. Don't tell me I wasted my time beating up crows with baseball bats for nothing. Oh wait, I forgot. Sephiroth killed him.
As much as I love Aerith as a character, I believe that Tifa is the better of the two, since she has somewhat of a more relatable personality, at least for me, with a more tragic backstory and a stronger character development, as well as being sexy and badass.
The rest.
As for the supporting characters, the best ones for me is Zack, because of how much of a role model he is to Cloud, giving off that he was the one who gave Cloud the Buster Sword, and if you want to know more about him, check out the pretty solid Crisis Core. Other side characters include Rufus and the generic but likable Turks, with Reno being who highlight the group. Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse in the Avalanche group also have the same issue of being one-dimensional, with the possible exception of Jesse very early in the game, until they're killed off without much chemistry to make the death important. And a few others that I didn't mention. Overall, some of these characters are better than others, but since they're not the main focus of the story, they can get away with not being so in-depth. Apart from Zack, he's really good.